Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me today for Book Editing Basics. My name is Angela DeCaris. I'm so pleased that you are spending part of your day with me for today's session. This is part of our weekly webinar series we call Webinar Wednesdays. We cover a variety of topics for authors, self-publishers who are looking to learn more about the industry, get some tips and do's and don'ts. Now, if at any point during the session you have any questions, please don't be shy. You can send those to me using the questions box in the GoToWebinar control panel, and I will keep an eye on that during the session today. We'll also have time at the end for questions as well. If you are joining BookLogix for the first time, welcome. We are a non-traditional book publisher and printer. We work with authors, small publishers, first-time folks just jumping into the publishing world to help them to put their books together, publish, print, sell their books. We offer a variety of services. Everything's a la carte that we do, so you can pick and choose the things that you need to best fit your process. But we're not here to talk all about BookLogix today. We are here to talk about editing. So enough about us. Our team really likes this quote about editing. I'm just going to pull part of it here, but editors really have to understand what the author intended to say without losing track of not just what one individual reader will take away, but how the piece will come across to readers with varying experiences and level of understanding. The editor really has to make suggestions for improvement that are consistent with the author's intent. So a good book editor really is going to play both sides. They're going to play the author side and make sure, is this manuscript really getting across what the author intended to? And then they're going to have their reader hat on, their outsider hat on, to see, okay, as an outsider, as a reader, what am I taking away from this? Am I getting out of this manuscript what the author was trying to tell me? Is it coming across well? Is it organized? Does it make sense? Obviously, the big one, is it correct in terms of punctuation, grammar, all that good stuff? But really, the editor, a good book editor, is going to wear multiple hats. So what is an editor? Now, there are varying definitions for the position of editor, and it does depend sometimes on the industry, on the publishing company themselves. They may have different positions that are called editor, and it may not do what you think. So for our purposes, when we talk about an editor, we are talking about somebody who revises, corrects, or arranges the contents and style of a work for publication, or someone who alters and revises another's work to make it conform to a standard or serve a particular purpose. Now, in other fields, you may have somebody who is referred to as an editor, where they are more directing or supervising the preparation of things. When you hear the term newspaper editor, you don't always mean the person that's literally making grammatical corrections in a newspaper article. The editor may be the one, assigning stories to be covered and deciding what stories are going in the paper, things like that. Magazine editors have different functions. So, but for today, for our purposes, we are talking about, in terms of book editor, somebody who is literally working on the manuscript with the author. So what does an editor do? Well, the most basic function of an editor in our publishing world is they are correcting spelling, punctuation, grammar, the usage, word choice, things like that. They are also ensuring that your manuscript or content meets publishing standards. So a good book editor is going to be familiar with the various standards for books in the book world, and will give you sometimes feedback or guidance on certain things and changes to make based upon that. Depending on the level of editing that you are getting, the editor may help you to eliminate redundancy. Also, dependent upon the level of editing that you are getting or the type of editor you're using, they're going to ensure effective organization. Typically, we see that falling under a level of editing that we call developmental editing. There may be other terms that other folks use, but when we talk about the overall organization of a manuscript or book, we are calling that a developmental editor. So sometimes you have different editors that will do different levels of editing. Some editors do a variety of levels. An editor also helps an author understand value proposition. So, how is this book going to help the reader? Or what is the reader going to get out of this book at the end of the day when they're finished reading it? If you are going about this process correctly as an author, you should already know your value proposition, ideally before you start writing that manuscript. Now, sometimes that can change. Your value proposition changes or evolves during the course of working on your book. But ideally, when you first start out and start writing, whether you're handwriting, typing, dictating, whatever you're doing, you should have a value proposition. What are you as the author trying to tell the reader? And your editor is going to help you make sure that you are delivering on that. Now, a good editor, again, depending on the level of editing, can look for ways to help you improve the book to make it a more marketable product. At the end of the day, one of the goals of the editorial process is putting a better product or book together. You may hear me use the term product a lot when I talk about books, because at the end of the day, a lot of the processes and line of thinking that you need to go through for your book is the same as a company developing any other product. Because at the end of the day, I'm assuming your goal is to sell that book, so it is a commercial product. An editor can also help give input to make sure the book is in line with the specific audience you're trying to target. So you may have heard the term target audience. You as an author should ideally know, either before you start writing or early on in the writing process, who this book is for. Who are you trying to target? And we talk more about that in some other sessions, but you definitely want to narrow that down, and you should convey that to your editor, your publisher, whoever you're working with, so that they can help make sure that the manuscript is in line with that. So editor versus book coach. Now, there may be some folks that you will find that offer both services, but the function is a separate function, a separate process. So typically you don't have one person doing both for you, although you may hire somebody who has the ability to do both. But typically you're going to have a book coach, and then you're going to switch over to an editor. You may still work with your coach, but you know, a book coach is great if you are struggling with the writing, you're still pretty far from completing it, or maybe you haven't even started. A book coach can really help you put together a plan for writing the book. They can, you know, help you brainstorm, what is this book going to look like? How many chapters are we going to work on? What's the word count that we want to be, you know, within range of, depending on genre? They may literally give you assignments, help you stay on task. The book coach may be reviewing your writing as you go, giving you feedback and revisions. Typically, you then employ an editor once the manuscript is done. So an editor is going to help you go through and revamp and clean up the completed work, while a book coach is really helping you create the work, if that makes sense. Now, there's also something called a ghostwriter. Ghostwriter will do the writing for you. They may work from some materials that you have, notes or drafts or audio recordings or presentations and things, but a ghostwriter, they'll do the writing for you. So not to be confused with either of these functions. And I see I jumped ahead, I forgot to advance my slide. So a ghostwriter, like I said, they're gonna write some or all of your book for you. In some cases, a ghostwriter may rewrite. So let's say you write a manuscript and you are just not happy with it. You know it needs work. You know that it's not where the writing quality needs to be. You could employ a ghostwriter to rewrite. So they're taking what you got, but they're writing it in a different or quote unquote better way. You know, now certainly ghostwriting, there's a lot more in most cases involved in it, so it is going to be more expensive than editing. And I've seen all kinds of different price ranges. Folks ask me how much for ghostwriting. I've seen projects anywhere from $3,000 to as much as $75,000. I once saw a project that was way more than that. It was, I want to say, a few $100,000. I don't necessarily advocate paying that much. That's, you know, when we start getting into price amounts that are like the cost of a house or something, I get very, very leery. But to some extent, you get what you pay for. I had somebody that paid $3,000 and thought they were going to get the equivalent of like $40,000 to $50,000 worth of ghostwriting work. So keep in mind, some cases you get what you pay for, but you want to be careful and figure out what you're spending your money on. And we do have a separate session that we do offer on ghostwriting. If you're interested, I do have a recording for that one I can send you a link to. So just let me know. Common reasons for thinking that you may not need an editor. Now, BookLogix has been around since 2009. I joined on in 2010, so about 15 years now in the publishing industry. Before that, worked in PR and in the TV news business. And I was shocked, doesn't shock me anymore, but I was shocked in the beginning working in publishing how many folks said they didn't need editing. And I still hear it all the time. I don't hear it any less than I heard it in the beginning of working in publishing, but now it doesn't surprise me anymore because I've heard it so much. So, you know, things that we hear a lot is, oh, well, I've already edited it myself, or I had a friend or family member edit it, or I already hired an editor, or I can't afford an editor. Certainly understandable in all of these scenarios for someone to think that they may not need editing. But I will tell you that even professional book editors find another book editor to edit when they do their own book. So even editors need an editor. Self-editing is an important part of your process. You absolutely 100% should self-edit. And you absolutely should have some kind of friend or family member or beta reader. Somebody else other than you needs to be reading through this manuscript before it starts going to professionals like editors. But definitely you need a professional editor. Now, this one you might say, I don't know what you mean. You know, I already hired an editor. Why do I still need editing? Well, it depends. When you hired the editor, what level of editing were they contracted to do? Were they contracted for a developmental edit? Does that developmental edit level include the levels that come below it? Because there's different levels of editing. And some editors do multiple rounds and levels and some do not. So sometimes folks hire somebody that just is doing a developmental edit or a line edit, and they don't realize that they might still need a copy edit or what's also called a proofread at the end. And certainly we absolutely understand, you know, editing, when you look at where your money's going in the publishing process, there's a few areas that are kind of where most of the money goes. For some folks that's marketing, for some folks it's illustration, but across the board, generally a decent chunk of your investment in doing a book is going to go towards the editing. So we understand when folks say that that's not in their budget. My advice is maybe save up more, wait a little bit longer until you can get some money in your budget, or investigate options for payment plans or things like that. You know, or maybe you find somebody who is somewhat newer to the industry and their rates are a little bit lower, things like that. There are, you know, different ways to get there, you know, and different things are going to work for different folks, but certainly I think it's worth waiting, budgeting, saving up your money to have a book editor go through the book. Now, one study that was done said that writers who did their own editing made 58% less than the average writer. So that's not the case for everyone, but certainly there is a concern that the lack of editing can impact the quality of your product and therefore the money that you make off of the book. Two typos of people in this world: those who can edit and those who can't. And you know, I've worked in publishing for years, and sometimes, you know, I make a mistake or I'll have a typo in something. So, you know, I have sometimes our editors look at stuff for me. And even I sometimes I'm like, oh no, I'm good. I don't need anybody to look at this. And that's when a mistake slips through and I'm like, oh, you know, should have had one of our editors look at it before I sent it out, or posted it, or, you know, did that PowerPoint or whatever the case may be. So professional and non-professional editors. So how, you know, what are the differences? How do you know how to find a good editor? We're going to talk about some of that stuff. So there are, of course, many people that are very well versed in the English language, right? You have English majors, literary majors, you have professors, teachers, folks that serve a function as an editor of a different type, like I said, a newspaper editor, things like that. You may know a whole slew of folks that have a great command of our English language, but are they right? What are they missing? So, you know, do they know the publishing standards? Do they know the industry practices? You know, are they experienced in book editing? Have they edited a book before? Do they know what style guides to use? All those kinds of things. There are differences in our English language of different styles, different ways things should be done in terms of punctuation. I mean, there's a bazillion rules to do with commas and hyphens and dashes and all these things. So what is acceptable for one use may not be the usage for book publishing. And somebody who's not a professional book editor, they may not know all those little nitty-gritty rules. So how do you know a good editor from a bad editor? Well, I mean, right off the bat, a good editor is going to be willing to collaborate with you. They're not going to say, hey, it's my way or the highway. Now, they may have certain, styles and standards that they want to hold to, but at the end of the day, they are willing to engage in a conversation with you to figure out, okay, what makes the most sense for you as the author and for this book that you're doing. Who's the target audience for the book? Is this appropriate or not appropriate? So even though they may push back on you and want to enforce certain rules, they are willing to discuss them with you, maybe explain the reasoning. If they're not going to help you understand why something needs to be done a certain way, that could become an issue for you. A good editor adheres to a style guide. Now, ideally in the book publishing world, in most cases, you are following Chicago manual style. So if you're trying to hire somebody for editing, don't mention Chicago. Ask them what style guide or guides they follow and see if they mention Chicago. If they do not, that may be a red flag. Because most books, you want to follow Chicago. Now, there may be exceptions. But in most cases, you want to follow Chicago. So if you have somebody that doesn't know what Chicago is, or they never mention it, or they don't discuss any style guides with you at all, that could be cause for concern. A good editor really knows how to help you develop your project and bring your vision to life. They don't push their vision on you. Now, they may make recommendations. They may have suggestions. They may talk to you about what might be better for your target audience or what might be better based on your book's value proposition. But they're not going to try to force you to do the book the way they think it should be. There's going to be, discussion, flexibility, trying to work together to create a good product. A good editor is going to help keep your voice. Now, obviously, their job is to clean it up, right? Help with your grammar, correct punctuation mistakes, make suggestions and things. But the book at the end of the day still needs to sound like you. So if they're like going in and doing rewriting, well, that's not going to teach you anything as a writer of how to improve if they just rewrite it for you. B, that doesn't really fall under editing. But C, that's imposing then their voice instead of it being in your voice, them guiding you to rewriting it in a better way or making corrections. And a good editor knows that at the end of the day, editing can be subjective. Sometimes, for the purposes of a certain story, an editor has to be flexible with you as an author, because maybe there's a really good reason why an author is trying to do something a certain way. Or maybe it's just something silly and there's a reason why they prefer one spelling of gray over another. Sometimes, yes, you want to follow a style guide, right? We want to follow Chicago manual style. But sometimes there are rules in Chicago where you do have flexibility and you can go with house style or author preference. So what are the different types of editing? Now, I will say this, different companies or providers or editors, they may have different names for some of the different levels of editing. These are terms, excuse me, that we use here at BookLogix. So I will go through these, but yeah, just know that, you may have folks using different terms in the industry. So developmental, line, copy, and proofreading. I apologize. I am click happy. Developmental is bigger picture. So a developmental edit, now obviously this depends fiction versus nonfiction of what exactly is done in the manuscript, but just in general terms, developmental is looking at the big picture. Is the content well organized? Is it in an order that makes sense? Are there gaps or holes or things missing from the manuscript or from what you as the author are trying to tell the reader? In fiction especially, we look at, character development, issues with the plot. Are things not making sense? Does the reader get lost? So that's where the editor is often putting on their outsider hat. They're pretending to be a reader. and saying just in general terms, is this book well organized? Does it have what it needs to have? Is there anything missing? Does it make sense? Is it delivering upon the promise of the value proposition? Line editing would come after developmental edit if you're getting all these different rounds of editing, and a line edit is going to look at the grammar and word choice and tense and all these things to make sure that line by line the writing is there, that it's where it needs to be, that it makes sense, that it is grammatically correct. A copy edit is going to look at the nitty-gritty stuff: spelling, punctuation, capitalization, some of the rules with numerals that are part of Chicago's guidelines, things like that. Now, a lot of times nowadays in our industry, copy edit and proofread may mean the same thing to a supplier. What I tend to find is authors more so call it proofreading, folks in the industry more so call it copy editing. Some folks use both for the same thing. We've started kind of interchanging the terms just because we know so many authors are coming to us asking for a proofread, and the true definition of proofread is different from what they're looking for. We call that a copy edit, so we just kind of started interchanging some of the terms. But technically in the industry, a proofread comes at the end after all the design work and layout and formatting is done, and you are reading and editing and doing a proofreading round on a physical document. Versus a copy edit, you're doing that stuff electronically, and layout and design typically is not done yet. So when's the right time to employ an editor? If you're looking for straight up editing and not ghostwriting of any kind or book coaching, you want to have your manuscript pretty much done. Most editors, when they get started, they want the entire manuscript start to finish, because it's hard, and I've been involved in this process. It's hard to edit one chapter at a time. For an editor, they want the entire manuscript, because when they're checking for certain things or fixing certain things, they may want to go back through the entire book for that specific issue or error and correct it all at the same time. They also want to be able to read the book in its entirety to make sure that everything is organized and where it needs to be. You should have, as an author, a clear idea of your target audience and your value proposition before you bring it to an editor, so that you can convey those things to them. Hey, editor, here's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to reach these people. I want my book to do this for a reader when they read it. As an author, you should ideally know kind of your general marketing objectives. What are you planning to do with this book? What are you hoping to see happen? And I think, it's important, and everybody, of course, has their own take on things, but I think it's important to have this stuff in place before you hire an editor, because you may be wasting some of your time and energy at that point if you're not ready with some of this stuff to convey to the editor before they get started. How much does it cost? That's the big question, right? Now, newer or freelance editors could be in some cases less costly, but that's not always the case. Keep in mind, at the end of the day, you get what you pay for. Editing can be expensive. I'm just going to go right out there and say it, and I think you have to know it because it's important. But it's usually worth the investment to help you have a better product. Now, depending on the supplier that you are engaging, typically a lot of folks are charging per word or per page. At BookLogix, we do per word because we don't have a set requirement of how you need to set up your manuscript before you come to us. Some folks charge per page, but they have a set of guidelines of, okay, author, your manuscript needs to be, size 12, double spacing, Times New Roman, yada, yada. Everybody's going to have their own set of requirements, but they'll have you set your manuscript up a certain way. So they may charge per page because they anticipate that if you set your manuscript up the way they ask you to, there's going to be an average number of words per page. But you may find some editors that work on an hourly rate. So again, you just want to crunch the numbers. What are the costs based on your manuscript? What are they going to do for that cost? Different levels of editing cost a different amount. So a line edit, and the higher you go, the more expensive, right? So a line edit is going to be more expensive than a copy edit. Now, some providers will include the lower levels in their fee. So if you sign up for a line edit with BookLogix, it includes a copy edit that comes after. So we build that into the pricing. but some editors do not. They treat each level of editing separately, and you may even have to use a different editor for the different levels of editing. You might see anywhere from 1 cent a word to 10 cents a word. You might see more. It really depends on the editor, their experience, the level of editing, of course. Sometimes it may depend on your specific manuscript too. If they do, let's say, a sample edit for you and they do a few pages and they're finding an extensive amount of mistakes, they may come at you with a higher fee. So it's important to communicate with that supplier, get cost estimates, maybe even give them a little bit of the manuscript to look at, give them a few chapters so they can see what level of editing they're recommending, so that you can see what they might be finding in it. So 10 reasons you might want to hire a professional editor. I think a great one is a fresh perspective, but I will say this, you should be having other folks read the manuscript before you even get to the point of paying for editing. You should have other folks, if you are part of a writing group, that's a great way for authors to be beta readers for each other, especially if you're part of a writing group that is specific to certain genres. I think that's great. There's tons of resources out there to find writing groups. I know, here in Atlanta, we have a few different Georgia Writers Association, Atlanta Writers Club. There's all kinds of other groups that are out there, but they will have sometimes subgroups by genre where you can join one of the other groups, a small writing group, and give each other feedback and critiques and stuff, help each other out. A professional editor, they're going to be objective. They're not your mom or your best friend, so they're going to give you some feedback that, yeah, you might not like it. They're trying to be objective. They're trying to help you have a better product. Saves you time. So how could this save you time? Well, unfortunately, what we've seen is when folks skip editing to begin with and put the book out there, they have to go backwards later on, because sometimes it happens, unfortunately, that people start posting Amazon reviews, giving bad feedback, and so then an editor is actually working backwards and going back into the publishing process again, and trying to make revisions and redoing things, and then layouts got to be cleaned up and all this stuff that adds on all this extra time. And certainly then that saves you frustration. The last thing you want to do is have bad feedback out there for your book if you have not gone through an editorial process. Editors are paid professionals, right? That's what they do. That's how they make their living. In most cases, they are reliable. They are professional. You do want to vet who you're looking for, though, of course. Make sure they are somebody that other folks have used and had a good experience with. Are they a licensed business or not? How can you get a hold of them if there's a dispute? All those kinds of things. They'll help improve your language use. Now, this does depend on the level of editing that you are getting. So a copy edit or proofread, that's not going to help your language use. So keep in mind, pay attention to what level of editing you are paying for. They are not going to fix your grammar in a proofread. You are going to want a line edit for that. They can help you develop the project, but again, it depends on what you're hiring them for. If you're just hiring them for a proofread, that is not part of their function to help you better develop the book. That would fall under developmental editing. But at the end of the day, whether you have one editor or multiple, and regardless of the rounds of editing and the levels of editing, they're trying to help you have a more professional product and get it ready for selling and marketing. Good editors, they're versatile, they're flexible, they're going to work with you, and at the end of the day, they're going to help you to be a better writer. Now, again, what they fix depends on what level of editing you hire them for, but they may still give you some advice, some input on your overall writing to help you improve your writing ability. So tips on hiring a book editor. You have to know exactly what you are going to get from this person. What's the level of editing? How many rounds of back and forth do I have? What's the costing? What are they going to be doing to the manuscript? How are they going to do it? Certainly you want to look at their credentials. Have they edited books before? What style guides do they use? What's their background? Who do they work for? Do they work for a publishing supplier? Are they freelance? There are great freelance editors out there. Unfortunately, there are also not so great ones out there. So a great thing to do is referrals. Talk to writers who have used that editor, and being part of a writing group is a great way to talk to other writers about editors they have hired. And ask them, hey, who did your editing? Did you like them? Did you have a good experience? That kind of thing. Certainly watch out for scams. Unfortunately, scammers have realized that there's a huge market in the non-traditional publishing world, and there are folks out there, I wish there weren't, but there are folks out there that are looking to scam writers. So just be careful. Getting direct referrals, again, is a great way. If you know other authors that have used a person, can be a great way to try to protect yourself. All right, any questions that you have on anything, I am happy to answer, and it doesn't have to be just about editing specifically. And if you think of questions later, BookLogix, one of our main goals is to assist writers. There is so much information out there, so much to learn about doing a book, that when the company started back in 2009, really part of our mission was to just help educate writers. Give them tips, give them input, help them learn more about the industry. So don't be shy. If you have any questions, you can always touch base with us later. You can call, you can email, or if you have other topics you'd like to see us do for webinars, let us know. We're always interested in providing any kind of resource or material that will help writers to be better educated. What I've seen over the last 15 years is the more educated an author is in all things publishing, the better chance for success they will have with their book. And I think for most of you, at the end of the day, that's the goal, right? To have a high quality product that is going to be successful, that you're going to make some money off of, hopefully, or maybe money's not your goal. Maybe it's to help promote your business or whatever the case may be. We're all hoping to have, at the end of the day, a book that will be a success. So yeah, don't be shy. Please reach out to us with any questions you have. And I really appreciate you taking some of your time with us today. I know everybody's busy, has things going on. So I always appreciate when folks carve out some time to join us and learn about the publishing process. So, all right, folks. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I really do appreciate it, and I hope that we will see you again. We are going to take a break next week due to Memorial Day, but we'll be back in early June, and we have a session on AI. So AI is really becoming quite an issue in the publishing world. So if you are free, I really encourage you to join us for that session the week after Memorial Day. And we do have the schedule on our website as well, BookLogix.com. Thanks so much, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day. Take care.